Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Peace talks kick off in Saudi Arabia between the US and Ukraine, hours after a Ukrainian drone attack on Russia kills 3 people. President Donald Trump doubles the tariff on Canadian steel as US stocks open lower today, causing major recession concerns. And Greenland goes to the polls as residents vote on the country's future. To our top story, and peace talks have been taking place in Saudi Arabia between Ukraine and US diplomats today. President Volodymyr Zelensky is not in attendance, but his Chief of Staff, Andrei Yermak, is leading negotiations for Kyiv. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is representing the United States as the country's highest-ranking official. I'm now joined by Russian expert and senior fellow, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, Anna Borshchevskaya. Anna, thank you so much for joining me this evening. First of all, how optimistic are you that US-Ukraine officials will be able to carve out a ceasefire deal? And when could we see the results of these negotiations come to light?
Thanks very much for having me. Well, it's hard to be optimistic given that all 3 sides at this stage have different positions and different interests. That is the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. And while Ukraine, for its part, appears to be bringing the most comprehensive, most detailed plan to date, the fact that there's so many differences at this stage, and that this is such an early time, it's hard to tell where this is going.
What will the main sticking points for both Ukraine and Russia actually be? As you said there's so many differences at the time.
Well, for Ukraine, the most important issue is getting security guarantees in some form. And it's unclear what exactly that would look like. But Ukraine must have security guarantees. And they are looking for resumption of intelligence sharing and military aid from the United States. And that's very important. These two key points are very important for Ukraine, given the trajectory of fighting. The United States, for its part, Donald Trump appears to be pushing very hard for some sort of a deal as quickly as possible. Russia, for its part, is taking a maximalist position. So again, at this stage, a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns.
We'll be speaking to our reporter in Moscow in just a moment's time, but I wanted to ask you what your reaction to Ukraine's recent drone attack on Russia is, and could that hinder talks and affect Ukraine's negotiating position right now?
I don't think it would hinder talks. The fact of the matter is, Russia is usually the country that steps up its military bombardment ahead of any negotiations, and that is really par for the course for how Russia does war and how Russia does negotiations. It's intended to intimidate Ukraine. They've done this on such a consistent basis. They've done that in other fighting outside Ukraine. So the fact that Ukraine is doing it while they're trying to legitimately bolster their bargaining position, and that is exactly what they need. They're not in a great place right now as far as bargaining positions go.
Is US support for Ukraine likely to resume if Kyiv commits to a peace process this week? We know relations have been particularly strained of late.
Well, I think, again, there will have to be some sort of Ukraine, because the United States, unfortunately, is putting so much pressure on Ukraine. But Ukraine is in a very difficult position. They are fighting for their survival. They were attacked by Russia. So for them, it's a matter of survival. And what they're asking for, and that is chiefly security guarantees, is also a matter of survival long term. They cannot have a peace at any cost, because a peace at any cost is not a real peace to begin with. And that's the main issue. Russia cannot be allowed to attack Ukraine again. Frankly, this is not just a matter of Ukrainian security, but broader European security. Russia will most likely move on to other countries if there's a hasty peace deal at any cost. And that's really what's at stake here. It's not just Ukraine, it's European security outside Ukraine.
Anna Borshchevskaya, Russian expert and senior fellow, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Now, 3 people have been killed and 9 others were injured in Moscow after a Ukrainian drone attack. It's believed to be the biggest strike against Russia in 3 years and on the day of the peace talks between Kyiv and Washington. We can now go live to Moscow to speak to our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, thank you so much for joining me this evening. This was a significant attack targeting 10 regions. It's believed to be the largest against Russia in 3 years. Can you tell us what exactly happened?
That's right. The massive attack against Russian regions, 343 Ukrainian drones have been intercepted by the Russian air defense systems, according to the Ministry of Defense. 91 of them over the Moscow region and capital Moscow, 126 over the Kursk region. Others have also been targeted in other regions of Russia. Now, what happened in Moscow was that several residential houses, several residential complexes have been hit and damaged by the falling debris of those drones. And although the Russian officials insist that it was a massive attack and it was eventually repelled, so they are saying it was successfully repelled, although the civilians have seen this damage done to their houses, their property, their cars that have been hit. Also, we've seen 4 Russian airports in Moscow suspending their operations for several hours, and at least 3 people have died as a result of the attack that has hit the supermarket distribution center. 3 men there were injured. 1 died on spot, 2 others in a hospital. So certainly that was one of the largest attacks against Russia. And we have heard the Russian officials saying that it was an attempt by the Ukrainian side to prove the world that they still have the capacity to carry out such attacks. And that is only proving, according to Russian officials, that the Russian forces have the upper hand on the battlefield, and therefore they are resorting to these measures. So certainly the large-scale attack, several regions hit, most notably the Russian capital.
Dasha, the Kursk region is a contested area across the border from Ukraine, where Russian forces say they're making significant advances right now. Why is this area so crucial to both sides?
Well, to give you the perspective, last August, Ukraine launched a surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region and has taken under their control significant swaths of the Russian territory. They were in control of several settlements of Russia's Kursk region, and Russia has launched the counterterrorism operation in response. And since August, Moscow has been making some gains, liberating village after village. And now we are hearing that the major offensive by the Russian armed forces has begun. On Tuesday, at least 12 villages have been liberated by the Russian armed forces. That means that the Ukrainian troops are encircled on the Russian territory. That means the supplies to these troops are dwindling more and more. And certainly that was an important bargaining chip for Ukraine. Controlling the territory inside Russia was one of the best cards that the Ukrainian side had, according to many political analysts. And as Russia is squeezing the Ukrainian troops out from its territory, definitely that's going to impact the way that the negotiations will be taking place. Despite that, Moscow has always been saying it is just the matter of when that will be taking place rather than if.
You just mentioned those negotiations. Let's get on to that. The attack happened as the peace talks were set to begin in Saudi Arabia between Kyiv and Washington. What impact has it had on the talks today? So, you know, the Kursk region impact and the drones.
Well, from the Russian perspective, the negotiations on peace are yet to begin because these are not negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv. These are the talks between the Ukrainian and American delegations. So therefore, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that there is nothing to be derailed by this attack against Russia or by the development in Kursk. What Moscow is saying, though, is definitely that the trajectory towards the negotiated settlement of this conflict that has started to emerge over the course of the past 2 weeks definitely is going to be spoiled. Another comment that we got from the Russian officials was that Moscow will have to respond, and there have been many calls by the Russian lawmakers for the Russian authorities to use Oreshnik hypersonic missiles, for instance, against the Ukrainian side in response to this attack by the drones against Russia on Tuesday morning. However, others are warning that this is yet a provocation by the Ukrainian side to make Moscow carry out such an attack, and that would be derailing even the negotiations that are taking place on the track of the restoration of ties between Moscow and Washington. So with all those elements in place, at this stage, it is unclear what sort of effect there will be. One thing that is clear is that Ukraine is definitely trying to show to the world the capacity it still has on the battlefield, but Moscow insists it does have the upper hand.
Dasha, Chernyshova in Moscow, thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. A 59-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter over the North Sea collision. The Coast Guard rescued 36 people after a cargo ship crashed with an oil tanker on Monday. One crew member is still missing and presumed dead. The cargo ship owners say the vessel was not carrying sodium cyanide as previously reported, but did have 4 empty containers which had once held the chemical. 6 people are dead in central and southern Gaza, whilst 4 have been killed in Jenin after Israeli attacks. An elderly woman is among the dead. It comes as ceasefire talks begin in Qatar to discuss the second phase of the deal between Israel and Hamas. The former Philippines president has been arrested over alleged crimes against humanity and forcibly taken onto a plane headed for The Hague. Rodrigo Duterte was stopped upon landing in Manila on the basis of an ICC warrant. The case focuses on thousands of killings that took place during his brutal crackdown on illegal drugs from 2011 until the end of his presidency. And President Trump says he'll buy a Tesla to support Elon Musk. It comes as the electric car maker's shares closed down more than 15% amid Musk's political actions in the White House. Wall Street's main indexes opened lower earlier today after a dramatic fall on Monday as investors react to President Trump's tariffs. Days earlier, Trump had been asked about a possible U.S. recession, where he told the interviewer there would be a period of transition as he attempted to bring wealth back to America. On Tuesday morning, the dollar slid further against the pound and also the euro. However, a sell-off in global shares have eased in Europe. Sarah Firth has the story.
When it comes to the American economy right now, well, there's not that much to cheer about. On the back of President Trump's tariff threats, economists are using words like uncertainty, volatility, and anxiety, all things the stock market responds badly to.
Continue to sell off in the wake of additional and continued uncertainty around what the Trump tariff situation is going to look like. We have a lot of different numbers and a lot of different trading partners that keep coming up in the news. And we're kind of waiting to see where things land today, the next hour, the next week. And market participants hate uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty around this right now.
Today, that anxiety continuing. And with the tariff threats and news of a possible government shutdown here in DC, the dreaded R word has again entered Americans' daily vocabulary.
I think the speed with which the market is reassessing probabilities around recession is directly linked with the two things. One, uncertainty around tariffs and what the impact may have on inflation and just the general economic outlook. And then two, there's a bit of a growth scare that's going on at the same time. And so those two things, compounded by consumer sentiment, which is just really bad right now, those things are adding up to this, moment of volatility in the market.
One thing we know the president does respond to is consumer sentiment. But in a Fox News interview over the weekend, he refused to rule out a recession. He did, however, tweet out his support for Elon Musk. Countries, both near and far, friend and foe, are responding to the turmoil over the president's trade war, provoking measures and countermeasures. The EU Commissioner for Trade claiming the US does not seem engaging to make a deal.
We want to have a constructive and positive relationship with the United States of America, and therefore I would highlight once again that our doors are opened for constructive engagement. We are absolutely convinced that no one wins from tariffs.
No one wins, but we know President Trump hates to lose. A White House spokesman has responded to the market volatility, saying industry leaders have responded to President Trump's America First economic agenda of tariffs, deregulation, and the unleashing of American energy with trillions in investment commitments that will, he says, create thousands of jobs. President Trump himself has called what's happening a state of transition. Trump promised to make America great again. But given continued market volatility and as the trade wars heat up, his critics say President Trump's actions in the White House have already made America at risk of recession again. Sarah Firth, Al Arabiya, Washington.
America is back.
Let's take another look at some of the other stories making headlines today. President Trump says he's instructed the Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium coming into the U.S. from Canada, taking it to 50%. Trump says the changes will go into effect tomorrow. Canada's incoming Prime Minister Mark Carney says it's an attack on Canadian workers, families, and also businesses. A 5.7 magnitude earthquake has struck the Peru-Brazil border earlier today. It's believed to be at a depth of 658 kilometers. The Vatican says Pope Francis has spent a quiet night in hospital. It's also indicated the 88-year-old pontiff could be discharged soon. He's been treated at Rome's Gemelli Hospital for more than 3 weeks for double pneumonia. And a prosecutor in Los Angeles has said the Menendez brothers must fully acknowledge the lies they told about the murder of their parents in order to be freed. Lyle and Eric Menendez has spent 34 years in prison after being convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole in 1996. They shot their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, at their house in Beverly Hills in 1989, and the case captivated the US. Now, Greenland heads to the polls today for the country's general election. Many citizens may use their vote as a chance to free themselves from Danish rule, and in the future, an option to take President Trump up on his promise to invest billions of dollars into Greenland to join the United States. The US president has consistently eyed up the territory, telling White House reporters the US needs Greenland for national security, and one way or another, we're gonna get it. Here's a reminder.
We also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security. And I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
Let's chat to senior researcher at the Norwegian Fridtjof and Nansen Institute, Christian Prip. Christian, you just heard there, one way or another, we are going to get it. The words of Donald Trump. Why is he so focused on acquiring Greenland for the US?
I think he already mentioned it, that it's very much for security reasons. Greenland is very important for the U.S. With its location. It's very strategically important place for the U.S. They are already there with an air base, but they want to expand their military activity on Greenland. But there are also other reasons for why he could be very interested. Greenland is rich in minerals, including very rare minerals that are used for mobile phones and electronic cars and bytes and these kind of things. And they are still in the ground. They have not been extracted. And by going into Greenland, he would be able to take and extract these very important minerals. He could take market shares from China, which is the dominating country in this business. And that could be a third reason also, is to keep China out of Greenland, actually, because China, as we know, is expanding in many ways and would also like to influence Greenland. That's clear. So these are the reasons I believe for Trump to be so interested in Greenland.
You're Danish yourself, and Greenland has been a semi-autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark since 1979. Do Greenlanders wish to free themselves from Denmark?
Yes, they would like to free themselves for Greenland. The great majority, at least, would like to do that. The question is then, and that is the divisive issue, is at what speed this should happen. I think now the greater majority want the independence process to be a rather slow one, recognizing that Greenland is not quite ready for independence in the near future because of its high dependency on getting economic support from Denmark.
As you just mentioned there, we're talking about economic support. Fishing is the main source of income to Greenland's economy. How much are they still reliant on the Danish government for funds?
They are still very much relying on Danish funds. A very big share of the national budget in Greenland is covered by funds that comes from Copenhagen, from from Denmark, and that is also, and this situation is not. It will take a while for this situation to change. It will take a lot of investments in Greenland, in other areas of business and fisheries. So that is why, as I said, that Greenland, I think Greenlanders want independence, but they also realize that they are not ready yet for this to happen.
And what are your predictions for today's election results and the future of Greenland, if you can see that far ahead?
Yes, my predictions for the election is that the present government, which is kind of center-left government, will remain in power after the election today, maybe in a broader coalition across the center of the political spectrum, because there is this sense in Greenland of seriousness about the President Trump's announcements and claims for Greenland. So I think there is a wish among the Greenland politicians to stand closer together. That is my prediction.
Christian Prip, senior researcher at the Norwegian Fridtjof Nansen Institute. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Let's take a look at the top business news. Volkswagen is forecasting another challenging year for ramping up EV sales, cutting costs and navigating trade tensions. That's as it seeks to streamline its operations in Europe and catch up with the cheaper and faster rivals in China. On Tuesday, Volkswagen reported that it expected a best at slight increase in this year's operating profit margin. However, the outlook does not factor in the impact of possible US tariffs. Spanish fashion retailer Mango is adapting to tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on imports from China. According to the CEO, they could also rethink the types of products it sells in the US, which is its fifth largest market. Tony Ruthith confirmed it does not plan to raise prices to offset the impact of tariffs, even though that could dent its margins. Turning to the sports news now. Liverpool boss Arne Slot says his side needs to produce the best performance of the season to see off PSG on Tuesday and progress to the Champions League quarter-finals. The Reds were second best for most of their last 16 first leg in Paris last week, but snatched a 1-0 victory thanks to Harvey Elliott's late strike. Liverpool remain in the running to win 3 trophies this season. And Manchester United have announced plans to build an iconic new 100,000-seater stadium close to Old Trafford. Co-owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe said he wanted to build the world's greatest football stadium, which will cost £2 billion and could be finished in 5 years' time. The club is currently £1 billion in debt and are yet to say how they do plan to pay for the stadium. A reminder of our top stories. Peace talks kick off in Saudi Arabia between the US and Ukraine, hours after a Ukrainian drone attack on Russia kills 3 people. President Donald Trump doubles the tariff on Canadian steel as US stocks open lower today, causing major recession concerns. And Greenland goes to the polls as residents vote on the country's future. That's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. The Dressing Room is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night.